News alerts flashed across screens worldwide, their urgency impossible to ignore. In living rooms, offices, and crowded cafes, people paused, eyes glued to the headlines as the world seemed to shift beneath their feet. The relentless stream of breaking news was more than just information. It was a warning, a signal that something monumental was unfolding on the global stage. Each headline was like a tremor, hinting at a much larger earthquake rumbling beneath the surface. The sense of unease grew with every update, as if the very foundations of nations were being tested. In Sri Lanka, the unthinkable happened. The country defaulted on its debt for the first time in its history. Protests erupted in Colombo, with thousands of citizens flooding the streets, their voices echoing with anger and desperation. The government, once seen as stable, now faced a crisis of legitimacy. Meanwhile, Pakistan found itself on the brink, desperately seeking an IMF bailout to stave off economic collapse. Years of crippling Chinese loans had left the country's finances in tatters, forcing officials into tense negotiations and difficult choices. The ghostly silence at Hambantota port in Sri Lanka stood as a stark warning. Once envisioned as a bustling hub of trade, it now sat deserted, an expensive monument to failed promises and mounting debt. These headlines, though scattered across continents, were all connected by a single, powerful thread: China's Belt and Road Initiative. What began as a vision for global connectivity had become a web of financial entanglements. Once hailed as the most ambitious infrastructure project in history, the BRI was now being described in far more ominous terms. Critics questioned its true motives, and the world began to see the darker side of easy money and rapid development. The dream of a new global trade network was showing deep cracks, literally and figuratively. Bridges crumbled, highways split, and ports that were supposed to be gateways to prosperity became symbols of stagnation. For years, China was seen as a benevolent giant, lifting nations with generous loans and state-of-the-art infrastructure. Ribbon-cutting ceremonies and handshakes promised a brighter future, and leaders across Asia, Africa, and beyond welcomed the investment. But now, stories of unfinished highways, idle power plants, and empty cities were everywhere. The grand projects that once inspired hope had become haunting reminders of overambition and mismanagement. The very projects meant to bring prosperity were now seen as instruments of economic burden, trapping countries in cycles of debt. Officials pored over documents, searching for solutions as the weight of obligations grew heavier. Citizens took to the streets, their frustration boiling over. They were angry not just at their own governments, but also at the distant power that had offered easy money with hidden strings attached. The sense of betrayal was palpable. Instead of jobs and growth, they faced mountains of debt and the painful loss of sovereignty over national assets. Ports, power plants, and even land were auctioned off or placed under foreign control, deepening the sense of loss. Investors grew wary, realizing that deals which seemed too good to be true often came with hidden costs. The world was learning a hard lesson about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fine print of international agreements. The headlines were just the beginning. Behind each story was a complex web of politics, economics, and human lives forever changed. As the dominoes began to fall, it became clear the world was witnessing the start of a much larger, more complicated story, one that would shape the future for years to come. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis. While Western economies struggled, China saw an opportunity to keep its industrial machine running. In 2013, President Xi Jinping unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative, a modern Silk Road connecting continents. The Belt referred to overland corridors, the road to a chain of seaports from Asia to Africa and Europe. China would provide financing and expertise. Partner countries would get new infrastructure. For many, it was a tempting offer, a new era of development led by Beijing. President Xi called it the project of the century, branding it as peaceful, inclusive, and mutually beneficial. But beneath the surface, China was building more than infrastructure. It was building influence. The scale of the Belt and Road Initiative is staggering. At its peak, over 150 countries and organizations were involved, representing a huge share of the world's population and GDP. Estimates put total investment at over $1 trillion, funneled through Chinese state banks and new institutions like the AIIB. Projects ranged from power plants in Pakistan to railways in Kenya and Laos, to fiber optic cables and industrial parks. Chinese companies and workers fanned out across the globe, transforming landscapes at breathtaking speed. For a time, it seemed a new world was being built, connected, powered, and traded through Chinese projects. The trillion-dollar bet was on, and construction was everywhere. But not all that was built would last. The Belt and Road Initiative is a tale of two outcomes, a grand vision that has sparked both hope and controversy across continents. On one side, there are undeniable successes. Greece's Piraeus port, once struggling, was transformed into a Mediterranean shipping hub, revitalizing local economies and creating thousands of jobs. In Pakistan, new power plants funded by the initiative have helped ease chronic blackouts, bringing reliable electricity to millions and fueling industrial growth. These projects met genuine needs and delivered tangible benefits, serving as Beijing's proof that its model of investment and partnership could work. For many, these developments brought hope for a brighter, more connected future. But, for every celebrated success, there was a sobering failure lurking in the shadows. Take Sri Lanka's Matala airport, for example. Built with generous Chinese loans, it quickly became infamous as the world's emptiest airport, with barely any flights or passengers to justify its massive cost. Nearby, the Hambantota port failed to attract business, leaving Sri Lanka unable to repay its debts. Ultimately, the port was handed over to China on a 99-year lease, raising concerns about sovereignty and control. In countries like Malaysia and Montenegro, ambitious projects were suspended or left incomplete, pushing national finances to the brink of bankruptcy and sparking public outcry. Common themes emerged: poor planning, inflated costs, and projects disconnected from the real needs of local communities. Many initiatives were driven more by political ambition than practical necessity. These so-called white elephants now stand as stark monuments to the dangers of easy money, unchecked ambition, and the pitfalls of ignoring local realities. The BRI's two faces, promise and peril, are now clear for the world to see. For every story of transformation, there is a cautionary tale of debt and disappointment. The line between lifeline and liability is razor thin, reminding us that grand ambitions must be matched by careful planning and genuine partnership. Beijing promoted the BRI as a partnership, but its motives were far more complex. The BRI expanded China's geopolitical influence, creating a network of dependent states likely to align with its interests. It solved domestic problems, exporting surplus steel, cement, and labor abroad to keep factories running. The initiative opened new markets for Chinese goods and secured supply chains for vital resources. By lending in renminbi, China pushed its currency onto the global stage. Building and controlling ports and railways reduced China's reliance on strategic choke points policed by rivals. The BRI was also about President Xi's legacy, a bold declaration of China's return to global power. The motives blended economic necessity, strategic ambition, and political ideology. The BRI was never just about roads and ports. It was about securing China's future at the top of the global order. The BRI's rapid expansion was fueled by vast sums of money with seemingly few strings attached. Unlike Western lenders, China's state banks moved fast and didn't demand reforms or transparency. Loans were often opaque, with higher interest rates and shorter repayment periods than those from the World Bank. Many were collateralized. If a country defaulted, China could seize the asset. Contracts required Chinese companies and labor. So much of the money never entered local economies. This model did little to build local skills or industries. Developing countries took on debt, but much of the benefit flowed back to China. The allure of quick financing blinded many governments to the long-term risks. The hidden costs would soon become clear. Sri Lanka's story is the BRI's most dramatic cautionary tale, a vivid example of how ambitious infrastructure dreams can turn into financial nightmares. After a devastating civil war, the Sri Lankan government sought rapid development, borrowing billions from China for grand projects like Hambantota Port and Matala Airport, hoping to boost the economy and create jobs. However, poor planning and rampant corruption meant these projects failed to generate the expected revenue, becoming white elephants instead. As debt payments mounted, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves dwindled, leading to a severe financial crisis that left the nation struggling to import essential goods. In 2017, unable to meet its debt obligations, Sri Lanka handed over Hambantota Port to China on a 99-year lease, a move that symbolized a loss of sovereignty. The deal sparked widespread outrage among citizens, who saw it as a surrender of national assets through debt, not war. The economic collapse led to mass protests, with citizens demanding accountability and change. Meanwhile, Pakistan's China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, valued at over $60 billion, promised economic transformation but instead pushed the country's debt to unsustainable levels. As a result, Pakistan has repeatedly sought IMF bailouts, which come with painful austerity measures that burden its citizens. Malaysia and Kenya have faced similar issues, with inflated project costs and fears of losing strategic assets to foreign control. The pattern is clear: initial euphoria over development prospects, followed by crippling debt and economic strain. Debt trap diplomacy is no longer a theory. It's a harsh reality for many nations entangled in these financial webs. What began as a dream of prosperity has, for many, become a nightmare of economic despair and lost sovereignty. As countries struggled to repay, China's image shifted from generous partner to relentless debt collector. Unlike Western lenders, China refused to join collective debt relief or forgive loans. Instead, it extended repayment periods or offered new loans to cover old ones, kicking the can down the road. Secrecy and confidentiality clauses made coordinated relief nearly impossible. China preferred one-on-one negotiations, using its leverage to secure favorable terms. The narrative of win-win cooperation faded, replaced by accusations of predatory lending. China, once the celebrated builder, now found itself in the unpopular business of collecting debts. Today, the Belt and Road Initiative is a shadow of its former self. The era of trillion-dollar promises is over. Beijing is now cautious, focused on managing a messy portfolio of bad loans. The BRI's legacy is a global warning. For developing nations, the lesson is clear. Easy money can come at a devastating price. Unsustainable debt, lost sovereignty, and failed projects. Transparency and good governance matter more than ever. Countries are now skeptical of grand promises, scrutinizing every deal. For China, the BRI has become a headache. Damaged reputation, strategic competition, and domestic criticism. The project of the century left Beijing with questionable loans and a tarnished image. The downfall of the BRI marks a turning point in global politics. The world is now wiser and warier about the true cost of global ambition.